The task for this project or interview is to interview an MIS professional about system analysis and design topics, and the main question that is needed to be answered is, what should a successful MIS person know about system analysis and design, and how should one prepare for a career within MIS or project management in today's career field?
Well, see, that's a loaded question. Really kind of comes down to looking at what field or what area of interest you're looking at in that type of work. Quite frankly, there's every element. You have project management. So you got the individuals who kind of look over your project, go ahead and identify all the tasks and schedule them out to corresponding individuals, and make sure that you meet your deadlines and everything happens there. So that's your standard project management. And I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of that because I just don't do that well. It's not my strong suit, but it's definitely a very important aspect. Then you got other people who just love to hack on code and just develop code all day, and that's great. I did that for 15, 20 years, just knocking code out. But at the same time, what they're looking for is a lot different from what a project manager needs. It's a lot different from what an architect needs. It's a lot different from what your business analyst needs as well. So, I was kind of looking through that spreadsheet that you gave me. The list, the priorities went through 19? And unfortunately, every single element is needed to some extent. But again, it kind of comes down to what your role is to determine what's most valuable for you. That's kind of why I was trying to get a good idea from your standpoint. Your career that you're going into, it looks like CIS, is that right?
Information technology.
Yeah. But is it a BA?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, when I went to school, I went originally for computer science, and then I went somewhere in there. I changed over to computer information systems, which is CIS. Primarily because CIS is really more focused on all your computer science courses, was really more directed towards the business aspect as opposed to engineering aspect. So, that was good for me at the time because it allowed me to learn a lot more about the business so that when I'm working with the business, I have some understanding of some things that they're working through, whether it's some marketing, whether it's product development, or just working with customers. Now, with that said, now I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I'd love to go back and get some engineering courses as well, but that's a different story. All right. So I gave you the link to my LinkedIn account. Now, granted, it's a little outdated. I haven't touched it in probably 2 years. But again, basically my background, graduated from Clemson in computer information systems, started working as a developer in an R&D shop upstate, then jumped into the consulting world, locally up in Greenville, and then thereafter jumped into working for Computer Associates for a while. Didn't stay there very long. They were very, what's the right word for this? I didn't feel like they had the customer's interest at heart all the time. They were really driven by the revenue that they were bringing in. So anyway, left there, worked for IBM for about 3.5 years. That was pretty cool. I got to fly all over the East Coast, from Florida all the way down to, from Florida all the way up to Manhattan, and actually Boston as well. So that was kind of fun. Did a little bit of work in Tennessee. Left there and worked at MetLife in Greenville here, and pretty much have been in Greenville ever since, working in either insurance or telecommunications companies. Most of that time I was doing development, as I mentioned earlier, but I have pretty much in every role. I was working from a lead standpoint and moving more towards an architect type of role, and that's what I'm doing today is more software architecture. Um, from the organization that I'm working in today, so I work for Optum Technologies. Optum Technologies is a subsidiary of United Health Group. United Health Group, you may know more, may be more familiar with United Health Care, which is an insurance company. What had happened was a couple years back, United Health Group had purchased Optum, which is another insurance company, and found that they had a pretty strong IT development group in it. So what they did is they merged all of the IT folks from United Health Care into and United Health Group into the Optum Technology Group, and that's where I am today. So as you may know, most of the work I'm doing right now is primarily dealing with healthcare, whether it's an insurance aspect or working with providers or working with payers, individuals who pay the providers. I think I've already kind of mentioned earlier in regards to positions I've had. What I can tell you on a day-to-day basis is I tend to be working with project leads, project managers, BAs, and developers. I generally will work with them and provide them guidelines on what they need to be working on, and also how they should be doing some of the tasks involved. Most recently, I'm working in the Salesforce arena. If you're not familiar with Salesforce, it is a cloud SaaS platform where the client that I'm working on right now, they have built their entire population. Well, it's member care management. So basically, patients, it's where they manage the health care for those patients. And what it comes down to is you'll have a client, which could be Aetna, it could be Blue Cross Blue Shield, it could be United Healthcare. So these companies will hire this client, or it would hire this group to support their members when they're not feeling well or they have a need to ensure that they have proper health care or proper management of their health. Generally, this becomes more involved when somebody's suffering from an illness or has recently came out of the hospital or is more in an elderly stage of life. So that could even go as far as going into hospice. So that's kind of what I'm doing today. Some of the things I do, again, kind of come down to looking at database design, data modeling, object order development and modeling. I try not to get into the requirements too much. That's really where the BAs come in. Business analysts come in, they work with the business, try to understand what the business needs and write out their use cases, process flows, and stuff to that effect. And kind of going back to your list here, information system building blocks, a lot of the elements you have here, from my standpoint, while they're all pretty much important, some of these are things that over years of experience, I kind of already have in the back of my head. So, when we're talking about systems analysis, a lot of things I can go do quickly because I've already done it before. I don't have to do a lot of research in that aspect. Process management, that's going to be a little different because process modeling, that really kind of comes into play of what the business needs at this time. If they have a specific way of doing things. What you will find, though, is a lot of times the business will have the same processes day in and day out. They just may be a little bit different from one group or another, but they're really trying to solve the same problem. I don't know. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you right now. Any questions you got? Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep either.
Nah. I'm just trying to make sure all the interview questions are pretty much done.
I try to hit the high ones first. Go ahead. Give you a moment.
Did you give the examples of some skills needed for MIS or MIT and the technology?
Well, again, it kind of comes down to what are you looking, what do you think you'll be doing? What do you want to do when you get in there? A lot is going to come down to, from there, I can give you some guidelines and some examples. If you want to go in more development standpoint, you like to hack out code and create stuff and make it work and, all that fun stuff, then, there's definitely areas there that are important. Project management's really on the other side completely because you're not really going in there and dealing with developing code, but basically you're going ahead and tracking and keeping an idea of who's doing what. Then you have the architect, and his role's kind of difficult because you got to kind of sway both of those boundaries. You have to understand what needs to be done from a technology standpoint, what you can do from a technology standpoint, but at the same time you have to understand the standard process or standard parts of the software development lifecycle and provide guidance and direction on that, and also be able to provide the solution to the developers. So with that, I'm going to ask you, Zach, what do you want to do when you grow up?
I never know. I could be going to get a master's degree after this, but I'm not really sure yet.
All right, well, if you're graduating, let's say you're graduating next year and you want to start doing work for a company, what do you see yourself doing? You see yourself working with the business closely, trying to figure out everything they need, document that, write some use cases, or do you say, hey, I don't want to work with business, just tell me what I need to do and I'll write it, I'll develop the application, I'll code whatever I need to code so that you can have what you want?
Probably a more solo job.
More solo?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that could fall into from a developer standpoint, because you're not going to. One of the good things is as a developer, you nowadays can kind of work in a vacuum. You don't actually have to work with a whole big team, but as long as somebody gives you the requirements of what needs to be developed, then you can just start hacking on the code. But if if you're not a developer and you're doing a BA job, you're going to have to be in meetings all day long, and you'll be writing documents describing what the business needs. And you have to be able to communicate that to the developers so that they can read what you have and say, okay, this is what you want. So BA's role really kind of comes into play as saying, let me talk to the business, understand what they need, and I'll communicate that in a way the developers can say, okay, I can write some code or I can develop something to solve for that. So I'm thinking you're probably on the end part there. Now, in the development world, there's pretty wide variety of jobs and roles. You have, database development. So I'm sure you've done some work with some databases. Is that right?
A lot of my classes actually, for some reason, haven't been too computer related, but I have worked with like Microsoft Access and Excel and all that, but and the SQL.
Okay. Now, SQL is something that pretty much every developer needs to know, no matter what. Where it really comes in different from being a DBA versus a developer and understanding SQL is really comes around how do relationships work? How do you create a table, and how do you ensure that indexes are on the table to provide the fastest response times possible? So, again, that's just one element there. But also, from a developer standpoint, you have back-end web service type of development where you're working and trying to develop the code to implement or do the business logic. So again, that requires a lot more understanding of what the business needs so that you can develop those process flows and develop the code to support that. But you also have front-end developers too. So for front-end developers, those individuals are the ones who actually can produce something that people see. So whether that's an application, a fat client type deal where you have Windows or on your iPhone, basically when you launch it, your screen comes up and it has all your UI components to it. A web page, So you'll see a lot of people. What I found is most people kind of stray away from the front end development and focus more on the back end or business logic component, because the front end, to make things look good on the front, is not always easy. Sometimes you'll have to have more of an artistic skill set, and it's one of the things I've found in my history is there are a lot of good developers out there who can program and develop stuff, but what you really need is a person who has good user experience skills. So that's your UI component. And a lot of times those are the individuals who come from more of a artistic background. They understand the difference between how colors support one another. So you have, your soft colors versus your harsh colors. And a lot of that comes down to when I'm presenting a page or my interface to my client or whoever's going to utilize the system, what type of interface? How does it need to look and feel? And they go through a whole bunch of different things that I don't even try to understand. But if you have that skill, it's good to have. I'll tell you that much. Because one thing you will find, and I found this out about a decade ago, I'm sure you know what mainframes and green screens are, but we had a client who had their application on the mainframe. And this is a good 10 years after the web came out and people started utilizing the web. So you don't see very many people using the mainframe. So what we try to do is say, okay, we're going to build an interface that will allow you to use your Internet Explorer, your Chrome, basically a web browser to fill out your forms, fill out your pages, and submit the data, and that's actually being sent to the mainframe. But for me, that was great because, quite frankly, I can't see why anybody wants to stay in the mainframe. What it came down to is when we delivered to the client, we had a lot of pushback from the users because primarily those users have been using the green screens forever. And because of that, they can they can fill out a form in 20, I won't say that, probably 5 seconds. 40 fields in 5 seconds by just tabbing and clicking and tabbing and clicking because it's all that body memorization. Now you say, oh, we're going to put you on a web page. Here's a mouse. You need to click here. You need to click here. You need to click here. They're like, every time I have to stop to move the mouse, that takes time. And I get paid by how many I do. And if I have to slow down every time I have to go submit a page or something to that effect there, so needless to say, in the long run, even though they spent probably well over $1 million for us to come in there and build a solution for them, they said, we don't want it. We like what we already have. So a user interface is very important because a lot of times if you go through and you develop your application, turn around and give it to the users, and the users either can't use it because it's not intuitive or it's not user-friendly, or anything where they don't feel that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're going to stop. They're going to get to a point where they're not going to use the system. And if they don't use the system, that's a waste of money. So definitely important anywhere where we talk about user interface design. Like number 16 is very important. Where's another one? Input and output, design and prototyping. Those are pretty important as well because there are two different models when you go through and do software development. You have the old waterfall approach. I'm sure you already have heard of that. And nowadays they have what's referred to as agile development. Assume you're familiar with that as well.
Which development?
Yeah, waterfall approach for software development lifecycle, and then there's also agile development methodologies.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, there's two different versions. The waterfall method is you're spending months and months and months gathering all the requirements. You're sitting with people, you're trying to figure out what they want. You walk away, you have, 300, you have binders of 300 pages of requirements that the business says they need. So, after 6 months to a year of documenting everything that's needed, then you turn around and you go through a design phase. So that's when an architect comes in and starts working through, all right, these are your requirements that you're asking for. So they're going to spend probably another couple of months designing your solution. After you design the solution, then you go into development. So at this point, you got another 3 to 6 months probably of development. And then at that time, you come back and say, okay, I've built my solution. I've gone through, now I'm going to test it. Everything looks great based on the requirements you've given. Now you come back to the business and say, here's your product. What we found in the last, 20, 30 years is that approach tends to fail dramatically. Mainly because by the time that we provide the business with their solution, that's not what they want anymore. Time's changed. We don't do that process anymore. Or, I didn't think it would look like that. So in those situations, the waterfall approach really has a pretty high fail rate. So the agile approach is really to do the same kind of thing, but instead of spanning it out so many years, you first say, tell me all your different user stories. Tell me, give me an example of something that your system needs to do. So that could be something like, it usually follows 3 parts. It follows a who, a what, and a why. The first one is the who is, who's going to be using the system? Who's your actor? What do you need to do? What does the system need to do for you? And lastly, why do you want to do that? So you could say, as a physician, I need to be able to look at my patient history so that I can provide him proper medical care. That's a user story. Fairly high level, but what it does is it provides you the information about your actor, what they need, and why they need it. But why it's fairly important, because one of the next things you gotta go through when you collect all the user stories is try to determine, well, of these user stories, which one have the most value to the business? Because if you say, as a provider, I need to be able to print my patient's information so I can look at it offline, well, that's not a lot of value there. So that's one of the things you start to work through from an agile standpoint. But anyway, the first phase is really to identify all your user stories that you need, break those up into smaller chunks, and then you actually have the business working with you as you go and develop a solution for a small subsection. Those are divided in what's called sprints. So each sprint, you are to develop, you are to solution, design, and develop a part of the program, part of your solution that will actually work at the end. And that could be as simple as I was able to log into an application using my username and password, or I'm able to log in using my Google credentials. That's if you can do that, that demonstrates you have working software. That's an immediate win for the business because it shows that something's being done. They're with you the entire time, so they can say, "Oh, perfect. This is what I want." Or when you demo it, they say, "Oh, no, this is not what I want." So I know that's probably more than what you wanted to know. Needless to say, I have a tendency of being a teacher, I think, maybe in a previous lives. But anyway,
More is better in our classes.
what's that?
More is always better in our classes.
Yeah, until you fall asleep. All right, so yeah, that's why it's kind of hard for me to just say, yeah, all of these are irrelevant or none of these are relevant, because I will tell you most of the things in some capacity will fall into a 1 or 2. Rare will I ever find something that has a 3. Now, what that means though is that there's different phases of the process where some elements have more value than others. At the beginning of a project that you do in development, support, not really important. Systems operation, not that important because you don't have anything out there yet. They only get important afterwards when you put something out there. Because what you don't want to do is have your development team, as they're working on new code, having to go back and fix and figure out why there's problems with the previous work that's been done. That's why you want to have that kind of group, that systems operations support, who will be there figuring out what the problem is and getting it resolved so they're not pulling your developer resources away from you. But again, you don't need them up front, but you definitely need them at the end. Project management, again, as I mentioned, is very important because if you don't have that discipline of saying, all right, what are the tasks that I need done? How quickly can we get them done? And also have the state of mind to say, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Is it done yet? What you'll end up finding is projects will take forever. They'll keep going and keep going and keep going. They'll never be completed. So project management is definitely important. Again, that's just not the type of role, though, that I like to do. So I'm not going to put it as essential. For me, being in the role of an architect, items that are very important, of course, is going to be systems analysis, database design, process design, application architecture and design. Those are all going to be very important to me because that's what I have to figure out. That's how I determine what your solution needs to look like. Okay. From a developer standpoint, developers don't care about project management. They don't care too much about systems analysis. Don't care too much about database design. They're expecting that to already be done for them. They're going to be just doing the coding. So what's important for them is really understanding the logic that they need to implement. They have to understand the technology that they're working in, whether it's Java or .NET or Node or AngularJS or HTML or CSS, whatever the technology that they are working in, that's what's going to be most important for them and how to actually do that development. Now, what you'll find out is as you get more discipline in the software development area is the concept of software engineering. So that's where you look at, design patterns and processes and principles, because by leveraging those principles and processes and utilizing those design patterns, you're not always you get to a point where you're not recreating the wheel every time. You can just pull something out of your sleeve that you've done before. I don't know. I've done enough talking. What questions you got?
I think that's plenty, but I guess can you send your ones and threes for that chart to me at some point?
Yeah, I could do that. I guess what I can do is I can look at it from my standpoint and just say, for my career, these are what I've deemed as most important. But again, it really kind of comes down to each individual and what they're doing.
All right.
Again, some of the things there's a few I'll probably add here, such as design patterns, design principles, and a few other things like that there. What else you got?
I think we're done with the interview questions.
Now, Ashley, is it?
Um,
Is she there?
yeah.
You say yes?
No, no, she's not here right now.
What? She ditched you? How rude. All right.
She's supposedly really busy.
I understand that. All right. So yeah, think about everything that I've mentioned. If you have any additional questions, let me know. I'll get back to you with ones and twos. And if I can find a three in here, I'll do that as well.
All right.
But really, the main message I have here is every element here is important. How important it comes really in what the individual, what their role is, and what they're doing. So, a project alone needs pretty much all these. What it really comes to, so with that said, it really comes down to how much work needs to be done in each one of those. A lot of that comes down to the experience of the people you have in your team. I mean, I've seen projects where there was no feasibility assessment or system proposal. You're just told to do it. So whether it's what you should do or not, sometimes you don't even have that. It's that, okay, we have it's referred to as a boat anchor anti-pattern. Anti-pattern is something you should not do. The more of those you have in your book bag, the better too. So the boat anchor anti-pattern says basically you have a CIO, a CEO. You know, one of these big guys. They come in. They had a meeting with the vendor, and the vendor sold them a product. And they spent $20 million on it. Now they said, okay, use this product to solve for our application needs. And you go look at it and go, yeah, that ain't going to happen. But unfortunately, because your CIO or CEO was told that it can be done, he's going to look at you and say, okay, I was told it can be done. You need to do it. So that's when you get situations where there's no feasibility study, you're just told to do it. Systems analysis. So a lot of the system analysis comes down to if you don't have the experience in those areas, you're going to be doing a lot of research. So I can tell you system analysis is not as high for me anymore because I've done I got the experience, I've done a lot of the background and research in the past. And data modeling and analysis, it really depends because a lot of times that may be done before you even get there. So you're going to be forced to use whatever's already in-house, whatever legacy application solution is out there. If you're looking at a brand new system, that's great. You have a lot more capability of doing database design and modeling and analysis. It really comes down to your situation.